Well, I'll hazard I can do more damage on my laptop sitting in my pyjamas before my first cup of Earl Grey than you can do in an entire year in the field. Oh, dear me. I'm terribly sorry. The 4th generation Suzuki Vitara. It's a bit different from the first one that was released in 1988, but is it any good? Should you care? Why, let's find out, shall we? Suzuki! Hey!
Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart. And we're together when we're together. Something big is happening among us. It's not as if we don't have to deal with our short.
So welcome back to Summit Garage in Dudley, and this is a 2018 Suzuki Vitara 1.6 SZT Kuro, or just a 1.6 Kuro. This car is for sale at Summit Garage at the moment, and I've always wanted to drive a 4th generation Vitara like this. But before we get into detail about the 4th generation Suzuki Vitara, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, to like this video and leave a comment below, and switch notifications on. It really helps us to rank higher on YouTube and to spread the love of tweed jackets all over the internet. So the 4th generation Suzuki Vitara was introduced in 2015. The 1st generation Vitara came out in 1988, and actually I did own a 1st generation Vitara right at the beginning of a time when the channel actually started. You might have actually seen that in the title sequence. It's a little car. We never actually filmed it because it didn't have a current MOT, so we couldn't actually do a review on it, but it was right there at the start of the channel in 2018. This 4th generation car is very different from that. That was a very rugged 4x4 really. This is more an SUV, although you can still get 4-wheel drive versions of the Vitara. The refinement of this in comparison with an original Vitara, well, there is really no comparison at all. It's a lot easier to drive. You still have this very high driving position, and you still have the option of running it in 2-wheel or 4-wheel drive. Those are called the all-grip models if that's what you wish to do. But this is actually a front-wheel drive car. That was an option as well. The engine in this car is a 1.6 petrol. It's Suzuki's own engine. It develops 120 brake horsepower. Later in 2018, 6 months or so after this car was registered, there was a major facelift for the Vitara that brought in some new engines. The principal one of those was the 1-litre booster jet engine, which generates about 109 horsepower, coupled to this 5-speed manual gearbox. And there was also the 1.4 booster jet that actually was available from about 2016 onwards, I think it is. Before the facelift happened, the 1.4 was only available in the Vitara S, which was the sort of top of the range model. That generates 138 horsepower. Now, in 2020, the range changed again. It wasn't really a facelift as such, but the 1.4 engine became the sole power output. The power was reduced to 130 horsepower, and it became a mild hybrid, and that is the only engine you can currently get in the range. Before the 2018 facelift, there was also a 1.6 diesel engine, but due to controversial government legislation and all sorts of other factors, as you know, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. Obviously, thank you once again to John Newey and the team at Summit Garage for allowing us to film this car today. So thanks, Summit Garage. Thumb it. Trim levels available in a Vitara have actually been quite consistent all the way through the car's production life over the last 6 years. Range starts with the SZ4 trim level, rising to the SZT trim level, of which this Kuro model is a variant, also known as the SZT Kuro. Then there's the SZ5. Before the 2018 facelift, there was also the Vitara S at the top of the range, which was exclusively available with that 1.4 booster jet with 140 horsepower, or 138 really. This 1.6 was dropped with that same facelift in 2018, and it feels perfectly fine. It's not an exceptional engine, it's not a bad engine. Suzuki engines are actually very reliable, and because this has no turbo or anything like that, I imagine this will have a very, very, very reliable life in service. Fuel economy of this engine has been reported about 45 miles per gallon, something like that. I don't know what we're getting at the moment, I'm afraid. I couldn't tell you. With the hybrid coming into existence and that being the only powertrain now offered, the price crept up from 2015 when you could buy an SZ4 with this engine and gearbox for under £14,000 to about £17,500 with the 1 litre engine in late 2018, and now the base start price for a Vitara is actually £22,000. Bear in mind that the Ssanyon Tivoli and the MG ZS, which are both rivals to this car, they actually have their top models starting at under £22,000. It sort of gives you a bit of context into the fact that maybe this Vitara has got a bit expensive. Obviously, this being a 2018 car and an early one at that on a 67 plate means that it's a lot more affordable than that. So that may be something to look at. The only thing I would say is that with something like an MG ZS or a Ssanyon Tivoli, you get a 7-year warranty. On a Suzuki, despite the fact that they're very reliable, you only get a 3-year warranty, which is, you know, standard for the class. You know, all sort of Volkswagen cars of this type are also like that, but it is a little bit sort of mean perhaps that they don't give you slightly more cover. From what I understand, the 0 to 60 time of this car is about 11 seconds. There's not the most amount of torque. I mean, the engine is a little bit more powerful than that in the MG ZS 1.5 manual, about a 15 more horsepower, although just like that you get a 5-speed manual as standard. There were automatic options available in the Vitara range. I think there still are, but it's reassuring to see that Suzuki gives a really wide range of drivetrain options. I mean, you can get the foregrip on the 1.6s, you can get in the 1 litres and the 1.4s and the hybrid. It is, however, something that saps the power and saps the economy, just like the automatic gearbox. So when you're choosing a Vitara, whether it's SZ4, SZT, SZ5 or the older Vitara S, just make sure you choose carefully as to what's going to be the right one for you. One thing that I noticed when I first drove one of these Vitaras, which was actually all the way back in 2017 when I was thinking of buying one, was how good the ride and handling of the car was. Now, I'm sitting a lot more upright than I would imagine. I don't think the seat goes down too much further than this actually. You do feel quite high, which is, you know, not necessarily a bad thing. After all, I drive a Ssanyon Tivoli every day, and that's quite a high car. But what's remarkable about a Vitara is the way that it actually goes around corners. The steering is actually rather good in it. It is a bit light at town speed. It does weight up a little bit more when you go out onto faster roads, but it doesn't feel like it's going to topple over. You think in a high car like this, it's going to have a huge shift in its body weight, and you'll feel that you're going to sort of understeer dramatically or something like that, but it doesn't do that. It actually has quite a composed ride, and it feels really good in the bends. I was really amazed when I first drove one of these cars, and that's probably one of the reasons to buy a Vitara over a Cinematography or an MG ZS. It actually drives in that respect a bit better. Obviously you're not so much with this 1.6 petrol that's maybe a little bit deficient in torque, although I'm sure most people will find that to be fine. But with the sort of large rotor, particularly the 1.4 booster jet before the hybrid system came in with 140 horsepower, that has been a very, very, very well received engine indeed. As far as things like refinement goes, the gearbox is actually quite nice to use. It's very easy to use. It reminds me of the one in the Suzuki Ignis that I drove on Tweed Jacket Reviews back in March 2020. In fact, the steering wheel is very similar. The infotainment system is similar, although this is an older version of it. And Suzuki's are generally quite user-friendly. I remember sourcing a Suzuki for a client actually quite recently, a Swift, and they were just very, very pleased with how easy the car was to drive. And in fact, this is pretty easy. It's quite comfortable. Visibility is generally quite good for a car like this, and you do have that sort of king of the road feel about it. The one thing that's distracted me though is there's acres and acres of shiny black plastic in here, and other Vitara models were able to have accents that were different colours from the black plastic, but because this is a Kuro edition and the paint works black as well with black alloys, it's just a bit oppressive and a bit dark for my tastes. We'll talk a bit more about this in the interior section, but if you get a later model, it doesn't feel a bit like that. The interior plastics are a bit better, but overall it does feel very nice to drive, and just as I was 4 years ago, I'm quite impressed with it.
Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart. And we're together when we're together, something big is happening among us. It's not as if we don't have to deal with our short...
Having not driven one of these cars in about 4 years, it's really nice to revisit it and find that actually it is just as good to drive as I remember. Anyway, let's have a look at the Suzuki Vitara's more practical side and take a look at the boot. Oh no, not key buzzers again! Because this is the Kuro Special Edition, we can see things like the black alloy wheels that are 17 inches in size, got some good sidewall on there as well, and then there's a little Kuro badge just here. The doors and the tailgate on this car are really, really light. One of the things that Suzuki were very proud of when they bought this car in 2015 was how light everything was. If you open this up, the space is about 375 litres. The boot floor is in its up position. I mean, you can put that down if you need to, but if you're going to fold the seats, that's what you want it to be. And again, unfortunately in this car we have a tyre repair kit and an air compressor. That's really not what I like to see. I'd like to see a space saver spare wheel, which of course is an option. In the boot we actually do have some useful hooks on this side here, as well as a 12-volt socket, and immediately that scores points over something like an MG ZS. We've got the same points in each side for storing things in, and of course a boot light. Parcel shelf feels a little bit lightweight, but that's probably part of the course these days. It's a very good shape as well actually for a car like this. It is a bit down on capacity compared with the ZS, but it's sort of similar to something like a Sanyong Tivoli. Overall it's a very practical shape, and it's actually really easy to load. There's no lip at all. These doors certainly do feel quite lightweight, although when the car was tested in 2015 it did get a maximum 5-star Euro NCAP score, so nothing really to worry about in terms of safety. If we just move body there so you can see how much knee room there is. Actually there's quite a lot. This is my driving position. I'm 5'11", and it's quite spacious in here. It's not as much as the Sanyong Tivoli or MG ZS, but it's still pretty good. The door cards in here, again, they sort of continue this theme, which we're going to see a lot with this car, which is that they are shiny hard. They're durable, but they just don't look or feel very nice. And there are other cars with hard door cards. Again, the two I've just mentioned, standing on Tivoli and DZS, exactly the same, but these just seem, I don't know, a little bit worse for some reason. There is a little sort of chrome or plastic highlight here, and we have electric rear windows in this car. I think all Vitaras do come with electric rear windows. But there's the door pocket down there, just about big enough for a bottle. There is no centre console really with an armrest in this particular model. I imagine you get one on an SZ5. There's also no rear armrest in here, although you can fold these rear seats down. I'd suggest you do that with the boot floor in the up position, and actually you can see that it actually is almost entirely flat, although there is quite a slope up there, so you could load items through nice and comfortably. And even the seat belt stays when you fold the seat back. Some of the things I've noticed at the back of this car, there is no light for the rear passengers. The windows don't roll around. We've got a very heavy tint on the rear windows in this car, by the way, as well, but they don't roll down very far, so you can't rest your arm there if it's a really hot day and you've got the windows open. One really good thing though about this car is the Isofix anchors for child seats. They're completely accessible like this. There's no fiddly covers or anything like that, so that's definitely a plus point. Before we talk about the front cabin of this Vitara, let's just address the fact that this key is the same as on a Vauxhall Aguila that was 10 years old that I sourced a few years ago. It's not the most sturdy looking thing, but you know, that's just the way it is. Some of the cars come with keyless entry, and so that wouldn't really be a problem. That key buzzer though is very annoying, which is why I didn't actually have the key in when I opened the door, because it would have gone off. On this Kuro model, everything is color-coded black, so it just makes it a bit dark in here. We've actually had problems filming today because the interior of the car is just so dark. Normally on sort of like a turquoise Vitara, which is actually the colour that I drove back in 2017, you'd have a turquoise accent on the dashboard just there, and turquoise accents on these vents just here as well. SZ4 Vitaras don't actually get a clock in the middle. This being based on an SZT and its special edition means you do get this rather natty clock in the middle of the air vents, but on an SZ4, I think also maybe on some of the earlier SZTs, that's just a blanking plate that says Suzuki in it, which is interesting. If we just switch the car on using the funny key, then the touchscreen in the middle is, I think, a 7-inch one. This is a pre-facelift car, so it actually is an older type of system. If that goes off, I will obviously make sure that that's muted. The touchscreen doesn't actually have any physical controls at all. There's no buttons as such. You just have this kind of funny volume slider just here, and then home buttons, and that's for voice commands, but you know, I personally wouldn't ever use them. So if we go for sat nav here, you can see that we're just in Hemley Hall, which is in Dudley, and it's actually quite quick to respond. Some of the contemporary reviewers have said this is a difficult system to use. I don't actually personally agree with that. I've used a lot of systems which are much more difficult than this, and we can connect things up. It's quite easy. The home button's there. This volume slider is a bit annoying, but there are actually controls on the steering wheel, which are physical buttons to adjust the volume instead, and obviously to turn off the sound when you need to. Also here we've got telephone controls just at the bottom of the steering wheel there. Again, this on other trims doesn't have black bits on the wheel. It has maybe silver or other body coloured bits. This car's got climate control, which is pretty useful. The air conditioning we've been using today, and it's really powerful in this car actually, even at quite a low setting. We've also got the DMS buttons and the rear heated window just there. Just below that there's a 12-volt socket and a USB port. It's pretty standard really for this type of car and this type of era. The driving position is pretty good. You can actually adjust it for reach, although it doesn't go that far. And also you can adjust it for rake. Let's just put it there. I do like the way in which the cabin feels actually reasonably light in here where you don't have all this black trim. It does feel reasonably light. The windows aren't too small, but I would recommend maybe not tinting those rear ones too heavily. Otherwise, it does feel a little bit like the inside of a very small box. One of the things I don't like about this car, although we have a nice conventional handbrake and a nice manual 5-speed gearbox, next to it with these kind of cup holders and little storage points, there is no centre armrest at all. You can see I've just put my phone mount in there to demonstrate some of where the storage. There's a lot of storage, but none of it's covered. It just feels a little bit kind of mean to have this relatively well-equipped car and not to have any form of armrest at all. We don't have leather trim in this car, but we do have this nice cloth upholstery with the white stitching, which I think looks very smart actually in this car. So I just switch the engine on. See, we've got a little monochrome display in the middle. It says sort of low fuel and things at the moment. I think I've got a warning for tyre pressures, but I've checked them on here and it's actually okay, so just ignore that. Nothing wrong with it really. The dials are very easy to see, they're very easy to read. I do like analog dials in a car, makes a refreshing change. You can see that this car has actually only done 22,000 miles, which is excellent. I'm sure they'll sort that tyre pressure monitoring thing out a bit later. It's nice to know we've got tyre pressure monitoring in a car, which is nice and safe. We've also got a stop start in this car, which is accessed by a button on the right hand side here. This is also where the fog light switch is, although there are actually two fog light switches. There's one here and one here, which is a bit strange. And there's a button for the traction control just there. Window switches are over here. It's actually automatic up and down in this car, which I can just do like this. There we go. It's nice and easy, very fast. And then the door locking buttons are there where it should be. And so it's the control for the mirrors. We don't get power folding mirrors in this car. I have to go up to the SZ5 trim level to get that. Overall, it's pretty good. I did say that there was no light for the passengers at the back. There's a light here in the middle, which I presume is what's for them, and there is one at the front. Although for some reason, you can switch on the map lights just by doing that. And if we can have that on, there we go. So there's plenty of lighting in here, which is really good. So it's pretty well equipped actually, this car. Yeah, I like it. Let's now see if the secret mission documents fit in the glove box of the Vitara. Yes, they do. Thanks, Suzuki! Suzuki! So I've retrieved my secret mission documents from the glove box, which I fitted in, put them in my door pocket. There is a big bottle holder as well in there, nice and practical. We switch the car on. You also see that this car's got a standard fit reversing camera, although those lines do look like they might have been painted on by Microsoft Paint in 1995. But it's nice to see them anyway. There are no parking sensors on this car. Again, you need to step up a trim level to the SZ5 to actually get them at this time. The front visibility is pretty good. You do get this nice command and driving position, but you do need that camera as the rear windows, like on so many of these cars, it's quite small, although unlike, say, I don't know, an MG ZS, the tiny little side windows right at the back next to the D pillar aren't that tiny. In conclusion then, what do I think of this 4th generation Suzuki Vitara? Well, the interior quality is a bit worse than I remembered it, but the driving experience is still very good. Particularly as a used buy, as in this case, I think this is a really good car, although the 3-year warranty might be a little bit too little for some. Oh, I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Every now and then a trigger has to be pulled. Thank you for watching this episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. I source cars for people on a professional basis. To find out more, please visit the links in the description below. Thank you. Yes, they do. Thanks, Suzuki! Suzuki!